Welcome back to another episode review and breakdown for Titans Season 3. Today we're talking Titans Season 3 Episode 8, titled Home. So of course, before we get into talking about this episode, spoiler warning if you've not seen this episode, and if you have seen this episode, then let me know down in the comments below, what did you think about this episode? What was your reaction to all the big moments? And of course, that crazy ending that I was not at all expecting, because I mean, in this episode, like, pretty much like the first half, it was like a calm episode where it was like, alright, pretty much just natural stuff is just happening and like nothing big was going on here. And then all of a sudden you got to the end and let's just say it went out with a bang and like literally. So yeah, let's go ahead and dive into Titans Season 3 Episode 8. So we start off following after last week's episode, where that ended, of course, with the cliffhanger of Gar going and meeting up with Molly, of course, Jason's friend that we met in the Red Hood flashback episode. So now we meet back up with her in present day, and Gar is talking to her. And it was really a quick scene here at the beginning, pretty much just like natural stuff, like him just, basically trying to get some information from her, see like what her last interaction was with him, where she thinks he went, all that stuff, and basically gives her contact info, like, you know, if you see something, say something, basically, and then she can tell Gar, and Gar can tell the Titans, and then they can find Jason. So that's basically the whole thing that's going on there. But then you look out in the sky, and we now have the Titans signal. So most likely Barbara Gordon is the one that lit up the Titans signal that now has replaced the Bat signal, because Batman just left Gotham City, very similar to what happened in the Arrowverse. So now we have the Titan signal, which is just a giant T, but still looks pretty cool. And we then get into one of our main characters of this episode with Tim Drake, who's barely had a presence in the season. Now remember, he popped up in the first episode, and then he was here a couple episodes ago in like the last scene of the episode where his restaurant was just shot up, and since then we hadn't seen him. So he's only appeared in 2 episodes so far. This is his 3rd episode, and definitely his biggest episode so far, because he shows up to Wayne Manor, and he automatically says that, like, I know you're Nightwing, and I know all this stuff about Batman and Robin, just like how in the comics, like, he was smart enough and he was able to use his detective skills to literally just figure out who Batman and Robin were, and that's honestly a really cool element from the character that I wasn't sure if they'd adapt for the show, but I'm really glad that they did. So, because it turns out he was originally a super fan of the Flying Graysons, so he went and saw the Flying Graysons, he even got Dick's autograph, and then months later he saw Robin battling alongside Batman using these same exact moves as Dick Grayson did during the Flying Graysons show. So obviously he's like, alright, well, if he's using the same exact moves, he said to take down the Penguin, then it's got to be the same guy. And then he saw the same thing that, like, Nightwing did the same thing that Robin does. So yeah, he was smart enough to figure all that stuff out. And then even with that, he was actually wondering, like, who the second Robin was, because he originally thought it was Jason Todd, which of course it was, but then he remembered, oh, but the second Robin died, and I just saw Jason Todd a couple nights ago, because he doesn't know that Jason died and came back to life and did that whole thing. So I thought that was a really nice thing in here as well. But of course, after this whole episode, Dick, I mean, clearly Tim just exposed him, basically, but Dick keeps trying to unconvince him, like, no, I'm not Robin, I'm not Nightwing, he's just copying my moves, I guess, or something like that. And then he leaves, and he goes after Jason, but then he gets hit by a car, which was pretty crazy. I mean, too bad for Dick, I guess. But then Jason is there, and he actually calls 911 for him, and this is where you start to see some of those shades of remorse that he's starting to have, and some of those sides of empathy, and you can see that, like, now he's starting to have the withdrawal from the anti-fear toxin, so he's starting to get back to normal, and he's starting to have feelings again. You see this when he goes to, I guess you could call it like a peak show or something like that, where we got a little bit of nudity. Oh wow, that was crazy. And so, like, he goes there, and it was, like, so weird and unsettling, but, like, that's how it was supposed to be, because it's like, you have a naked woman sitting there, and then he's like, alright, so you're Dawn, and you're Hank, and he's basically, like, role-playing here, and he's just basically wanting to do that just so he could tell Hank, like, I'm sorry. And then, of course, the people in the thing get super freaked out, and he's like, oh yeah, I killed you, like, wow. That's crazy, but like I said, you can clearly see the signs of remorse that he has for killing Hank and everything else that he did, because before he was on the anti-fear toxin, so he wasn't completely in control. He was under the influence of the fear toxin and also the Scarecrow. So now that it's just Jason again, you're starting to get more so onto that redemption arc, and I've had the biggest feeling that this was going to happen by the end of the season. I'm still wondering how it's going to end off, whether he's going to become a hero again and rejoin the Titans as Red Hood, or maybe if he gets his own spin-off series and goes off to be an anti-hero or something along those lines. Meanwhile, we catch up with Connor and Blackfire, who, as we've gotten the little hints and teases here over the past couple episodes, they've been flirting. They finally take the next step in the relationship, and they doing it, so we catch up with them in bed, and then actually later we meet up with them actually in the process of it, so that was pretty cool, I guess. And honestly, I just really liked their relationship, because there was this part where they were like looking at this star map, and she was able to show him Krypton, because of course he never knew what Krypton was because he was just created in a lab, and she gets to show him Tamaran as well. And like I just really like those reflections on his character, that I think Blackfire works really well, and with their chemistry and everything, that throughout the season, like of course Superboy was a big character last season because that's when he was introduced. This season he doesn't have as big of a role, but you still have these little hints here where, like, he says, for example, like, this is my first time. She's like, oh, first time with a Tamaran? No, first time ever. And I mean, to be fair, if you're gonna do it for the first time, you do it with Blackfire. That's definitely something to brag about right there. But yeah, I just really enjoy the relationship, and it gets me honestly kind of sad, because by the end of this, I'm pretty sure she's going to end up being the villain, so she's going to probably break his heart. But I really love their relationship, and I love them together as a couple. But of course, something happens, because Corey ends up walking in on them and actually almost kills them, because she's once again doing the whole sleepwalking thing, having those visions. So she decides to get back inside of that chamber that we saw do back in, I think, episode 4 or 5, I think it was. And in these visions, they're really confusing. I mean, just like they were before, they're really confusing, because you have this woman in a theater, and then there's like this baby with green glowing eyes, so clearly it's a Tamaranian baby. And then the question is that Starfire or Blackfire? Because it could be Starfire, but I have a feeling it might be Blackfire, because all of the other visions that Starfire was previously having were about Blackfire. So I'm not sure if this is something that Blackfire is doing intentionally, because I'm pretty sure that's how it was the first time, where she was intentionally giving Corey these visions so that she could then find her and save her and everything. So I'm not sure if she's doing it here on purpose, and if this whole being a Titan thing is just a ruse and she's just undercover or something, or if it really is something else. And I'm really intrigued and excited to see where this goes. But another character in this episode that has a really interesting story is Dr. Jonathan Crane, aka the Scarecrow, because he's just starting to have a bunch of mental breakdowns, because basically his whole plan was just thrown out the window, because we saw that last week, that his plan was to basically mass produce this anti-fear toxin and spread it throughout the city, maybe sell it or something like that so he can make some money off of it. But then the Titans shut down his whole operation, so he's got to start from scratch here, and he comes up with this plan about just putting it in Gotham's water supply. But he's just having these mental breakdowns. You can tell that he almost kind of misses Jason, which is kind of weird in a twisted way. And then he actually goes and visits his mom, and she clearly doesn't have the best relationship with him, because she ends up hitting a panic button and calling the cops on him, which then he just ends up killing her. So R.I.P. Mrs. Crane. So she's dead. But then Molly actually ends up calling Gar and says that Jason wants to meet up with Dick. No backup. It's in these like tunnels in Gotham City. And Tim actually sees him and runs into Dick on his way there. He doesn't actually go down with him, but he sticks around out there. And this was a really interesting scene here. I really enjoyed the scene where you have that conversation between Jason and Dick in the tunnels, because they're not face to face. They're like throughout the tunnels. You can just hear each other because of like the echoes and stuff. And basically Jason tells Dick that he wants to come home. He wants to be a Titan again. Then you get this nice conversation back at Wayne Manor, where the Titans are discussing, like, should they do this or should they not? I mean, this guy is a murderer. He killed Hank. can we just let him back in the house and pretend everything's normal? And then, yeah, so that is a really good question that I'm interested to see what they officially decide on, because I'm pretty sure he is going to be redeemed by the end of this, but he did kill Hank, so I don't know how much they can do. But at the same time, like I said, we had Tim following Dick earlier, but then he sees Jason and starts following Jason. But then after Jason disappears, he's like, all right, where'd he go? And then all of a sudden, Scarecrow shows up and shoots him in the back. So then Jason comes over to check and see if he's okay, but then the Titans show up, so Jason runs away. Really doesn't look like a good situation there, because the Titans saw Jason, so they're probably going to think that Jason is the one that shot Tim. And, I mean, he was shot in the back, so I don't know, like clearly he's not going to be dead or anything, because like, the Titans will be able to get him help, but like a shot in the back like that, like with the spine, that could paralyze him. So I'm not sure if he is going to be the second Robin like he wants to, but that was definitely not something I was expecting. But things get even worse here, because then Starfire goes into the building that Scarecrow just ran into and basically burns the whole place up. She just goes into action, but it turns out all those chemicals are flammable, so the whole place blows up, and turns out it was a trap. That was the setup, and it was Scarecrow's whole plan was that all of his anti-fear toxin was in there, and now because she blew the place up, it is now all in Gotham's water supply. So yeah, he got his way anyway, and basically his plan has succeeded, and I'm really excited to see where this goes. And the final shot of the episode is the Titan signal once again, but this time it's red. So I'm not really sure what that means, but it's definitely really cool, and it was a nice visual. But yeah, things are finally stepping up here. We're getting into like the climax, and things are going down. And yeah, I mean, you saw just a couple episodes ago how like just a couple different criminals were able to shoot up that whole Tim Drake family restaurant with just a little bit of anti-fear toxin. But now the whole city, and in the water supply, like everybody uses water, like whether it's like to wash their hands or brush their teeth, or you know, just actually drink like tap water or something. Like, wow, that is not good. But unfortunately, we're not even going to be able to see the repercussions of this until like 2 weeks from now, because next week's episode is actually the Raven and Dawn episode, which I'm really excited for, because, you know, we're over halfway through the season and we haven't seen either one of them at all yet. Well, we did see Dawn a couple episodes ago. So yeah, I am excited to see that for sure, but it does kind of suck that we have to wait a whole 2 weeks to see the conclusion, well maybe not conclusion, but at least the continuation of this storyline after just such this huge event just happened in Gotham City. Like, the whole water supply is like poison now, basically. So, anyways, though, guys, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think about Titans Season 3, Episode 8? Again, I thought it was a pretty good episode. It was a solid episode. Definitely started off not thinking it was really going anywhere into anything important, but definitely went out with a bang. I'm excited for next week's episode. But for now, guys, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think about Titans Season 3, Episode 8? And thanks for watching. Please drop a like if you enjoyed this video, and hit the subscribe button so I can keep up to date on everything that goes on in the DC life.